Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tom Banky, and I'm the Manager of Communications and Development here at Forward Community Investments. And I would like to welcome you to today's webinar titled The Impacts Nonprofits Have When They Engage with Voters with Caitlin Donnelly of Nonprofit Vote. Forward Community Investments is a community developmental financial institution that serves the state of Wisconsin. We are an investor, connector, and advisor for organizations and initiatives that reduce racial inequities and socioeconomic disparities in Wisconsin communities. We are able to accomplish this through community financing, community development services, and grant making. For more information regarding FCI and all that we do, I invite you to visit our website at www.forwardci.org. At this time, I'd like to share some housekeeping notes with you. This presentation will be recorded and posted on our website for you to share with colleagues and friends. In addition to the recording, we will also be posting the presentation slides for your reference. An email will be sent out to all of the registrants later this week with all of that information so you can access the recording and the presenter slides as well as any other additional resources that we name during our presentation. We will also be taking questions throughout the presentation. You can interact with us in a couple different ways. You can use the chat feature, which is located on the GoToWebinar toolbar, or the questions feature. Feel free to enter those in throughout the presentation. I'll be collating those and forming those for the Q&A session following Caitlin's presentation. So, as I'm sure most of you are aware, we have a crucial election coming up in November. FCI has decided to act and ensure that our partner organizations have the tools and knowledge that can be passed along to all voter-eligible citizens that will assist them in registering and voting in this upcoming election. It is critical to note that the politicians that are elected during this election shape the policies that affect everyone. Do not expect someone to speak up for you. You need to speak up for yourself. Once again, thank you all for joining us. And then at this point, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Caitlin.
Thank you, Tom. Hello, everyone. My name is Caitlin Donnelly. I am the Education Director for Nonprofit Vote. I thank Forward Community Investment for having me, and I'm really excited for this presentation.
Caitlin, can I jump in quick? It looks like, I'm sorry, but it looks like you have the preview view on for your presentation. So we are seeing the upcoming slide in the left-hand corner. So we're not seeing the entire slide. I don't know if you have, if you're connected to an external monitor or anything like that.
I am. I was about to ask if that was the case.
So if you could just
apologies.
Yeah, no worries. And then I think if you just disconnect that monitor, then maybe that would just show up, I believe, on the laptop.
Yep. Let's see. It'll come back. Oh, right now it only wants to do the other monitor.
Sure. Otherwise, maybe what you can do is if you hit the Windows icon and hold that down and push the letter P, that should give you a menu for you can just duplicate your screen instead of having it two separate screens.
Oh, you know what? I was hitting the wrong thing. Okay. There we go. So I will put this into presentation mode now.
Perfect.
Great. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you. Glad we were able to get that sorted out. I could tell there was something happening. But yes, I work with Nonprofit Vote, and I'm excited to share with you all a little bit about our organization. Really, we exist to serve other nonprofits and help nonprofits engage the people they serve in voting and elections. So our website is a treasure trove of nonpartisan resources, everything from candidate engagement toolkits to fact sheets and checklists for doing voter registration, reasons to register. You can find so many things that will be really helpful in terms of building a voter engagement strategy that works for your nonprofit. So I encourage you to take a peek at those resources. And we will dive in. I want to start today talking about why nonprofits are so well situated and so critical in the voter engagement sphere. So when we look at data from across the country from 2016 and other recent election years, looking particularly at presidential election years, we see big disparities around voter turnout along lines of race, age, and in terms of turnout, and also who's contacted. Disparities exist in every state, regardless of the kinds of voting laws that you have, or even a lot of historical things in your state. Really, as a country, we're still grappling with the effects of not everyone having the vote. So it's really important that nonprofits get involved, because what we see is this negative feedback loop of people not voting, and then they're labeled as an unlikely voter on the rolls, so the campaigns don't make contact. If you are a regular voter, you probably had people, before the primary coming by, knocking on your door, talking to you about candidates. The campaigns use the public voter rolls to make those lists, and they don't go visit people who A, aren't registered, or B, who aren't actually turning out to vote. So then the people remain unlikely to vote because nobody's asking them. They're really disengaged from the system. But nonprofits can have a really big effect here, and we know that because we've done a lot of research on it. So I have the cover of our Engaging New Voters report up on this slide. And what we do every 2 years is put out some original research that looks at nonprofit organizations that have partnered with us to do voter engagement. So in every state that we have a program, we have an anchor partner doing like voter engagement is their sort of bread and butter, like very core to their mission. And they partner with mostly human service agency type nonprofits, nonprofits that are very embedded in their communities, but maybe haven't been doing anything around engaging the people they serve in voting. And so we look at specifically those nonprofits, and given just a little bit of resources, what is the impact they're having on their communities? So we saw in our 2016 data, where we looked specifically at actually younger voters, voters under 30, that voters that were contacted by nonprofits, the blue bar here, turned out at a much higher rate than voters with comparable demographics in terms of age, race, income level. We looked at a multitude of factors sort of matching up these voters, and we find that nonprofits have a really significant impact here, 5.7 percentage points higher in terms of turnout. And we see that across all racial lines. So nonprofits are, really helping the people they serve, and those that have a historic low voter turnout in their communities get out to the polls. So we like to think about it as a positive feedback loop, because when nonprofits can engage and get people voting, they then become labeled as likely voters, the campaigns make contact, and even if the nonprofit wasn't as active in that voter's life anymore, they're more likely to remain a voter now that they're in this sort of positive cycle. So, it's really important for us to make the case that nonprofits can and should do this and do this well, but we know we also have to provide the resources. So, this report has that analysis, those good data points, talking points, and you can really use it to make the case to the leadership in your organization or the staff and really build a sense of interest, buy-in, and urgency around engaging the people you serve in voting. As I mentioned before, we've got toolkits, checklists, timelines, and other materials all on our website. And we do a lot of webinars. So a lot of the content I'll be covering today is actually going to be in a webinar we do in October. So you all are getting the first peek at this year's Get Out the Vote content. All our webinars are free, and we put the recordings up on our YouTube page and linked to our website. So if there's a webinar topic that we've done that you're interested in, you can find the recordings and all the slide decks on our website. Whether you're feel like you need to go really in depth with how to remain nonpartisan, or you're thinking about engaging candidates in a debate or forum, we have webinars on all those topics, and we have really experienced organizers, lawyers, leaders giving you that information. So what I really want to do is talk about getting out the vote, and so we'll spend the rest of our time really talking about some of the strategies and messages that work for Get Out the Vote. And if you have questions on anything that I've said or I'm about to say, please, please, please put those questions in the chat box. I would be happy to answer them, and I'll pause partway through to see if there are any questions. So Get Out the Vote, often you see it abbreviated to GOTV. It's really critical, and it often comes after a voter registration drive, and it's how we can convert people that we've registered into actual voters. They have to be registered to vote, but registration isn't where it ends. Obviously, there are so many people who maybe are registered but aren't turning out. So the role you can play here is to really inform voters and remind them of the importance of getting out to vote. And you can prepare them for the voting process as well. And you can do this with, a lot of the traditional tactics like door-to-door canvassing, doing phone banking or phone canvassing, literature drops, mailers, robocalls, or you can just include it into the things that your organization already does. Are there opportunities to have discussions at meetings or events about voting? Do you send out a newsletter? You could use your social media. There are lots of ways to get this information out, and we'll cover some of those ways in this presentation. So when you are developing your Get Out the Vote strategy, some of the things to consider is who you'll be able to reach in the next few weeks. Who is coming through those doors or going to your events, or who will you see in the community? Really think about who it is that is your target audience and how you're going to reach them. So what will those points of contact look like? Because that will really inform the strategy and the methods that you choose to use. And lastly, you want to think about how the staff and volunteers at your organization are trained or prepared to answer questions about voting and to assist people who want to vote in accessing the information or resources they need. So you may want to think about doing a training or putting out a fact sheet or maybe sending them this PowerPoint. So when we're doing Get Out the Vote, there are some messages that really work, and Tom, I think, really actually hit on some of them in his welcome. Reminding people that it's important to stand up for our rights and that we need to elect people that will uplift our communities and that represent us. Reminding people that their vote really does matter. A lot of people feel that, one vote doesn't have an impact, but we know that frankly that's not true. The 2016 election was decided by fewer than 100,000 votes when you look at the 3 districts in the 3 states that really swung the electoral vote. In Virginia, there was a special election, and it was decided by a coin toss this year because it was a tied vote. So individual votes really do matter. And lastly, because they matter, we need voters' help. We need them to send the message to politicians and to our government and our community at large that we're here, we're paying attention, we're voting, and we need to be listened to, and that we are actively engaged. So those positive messages we find are really effective when you can inspire people to vote. In general, we try to stay away from messages that might shame people for not voting in the past, or telling them that if you don't vote you can't complain. Try to keep it more positive. Like, if you do vote, you're choosing our next leaders. You're choosing the people that are going to represent you and your family and our community. So keep the messaging positive and think about what's going to resonate for the people in your community. And make sure you have information about voting. So I spent a lot of time today on the Wisconsin Secretary of State website, I want to say. In my view, it's a little cut off at the top, but the website for voting and elections is actually really good. I was really impressed with all the different fact sheets and easy to access information. So if you are engaging people as voters, you want to have this bookmarked on your desktop, be able to pull it up so that if you have technical questions or are getting technical questions, you can probably find all the answers here. A really exciting thing I realized is that there's same-day voter registration. So all of these resources, these proof of residence documents, I'm not going to go through them all, but these are the kinds of information that you really want to understand or have printed out and accessible, so that if somebody tells you that they're not registered, you can say that's fine, because you can actually get registered on election day. You just need to bring this proof of residence. You also need to bring photo ID in order to vote. So this is a list of acceptable photo IDs. There's more information on that website. But whenever you're talking to voters, you want to make sure that they're aware that this is a requirement, that they need to bring these documents, otherwise they won't be able to cast their ballot. The My Vote Wisconsin page is also really great because this is a place that you can find sample ballots. So if you look up, you can search by address for a sample ballot. And I think those are great get out the vote tools because a lot of people are concerned about, I'm not educated enough. I don't know who I'd vote for in all the races. I don't even know who's running. Well, if you can give them sample ballots or show them how to find their sample ballot, then voters will be able to research the candidates and the issues and make a really informed decision. And that, builds a lot of confidence and more enthusiasm about voting in general. Plus, this website has great information for military and overseas voters, people who want to vote absentee, because it's no excuse absentee ballot state. So you can, if you don't think you'll be available on election day, you can request an absentee ballot. So this is a really good resource for you all to use, but also to get the people in your community and the people that your organization serves engaged and sort of, navigating this site and making sure that they're educated and equipped with what they need to vote. So early voting activities and just doing early voting, I think, is a really great way to make sure that people vote. I heard the other day a great reason to do early voting. If you vote early, you won't get those canvassers on your doorstep or the literature. They'll know that you've already cast your ballot, so they won't come knocking. It's also, for many people, just much more convenient to vote early or vote by mail. And promoting early voting is a really good way for people who, maybe that day, election day, wasn't going to be a good day for them. It's a good way to make sure they can stay involved. So once you've got all your information about the forms of ID that people need to cast their ballot, how they can get registered, whether you know about the early voting period and how to request a vote by mail ballot, then you'll be really well equipped to talk to voters about their plan because you'll have lots of options to give them. So some questions that you could use to sort of prompt folks to think about their plan to vote are things like, are you voting early or on election day? Asking them when they're going. Are you going before work or after work? You may actually want to even ask them how they plan to get to their polling place and if they know where their polling place is. And making sure that they have that ID needed, especially since that is I believe, a newer requirement. There may still be a lot of confusion. There was a cute little video on the website that you could show folks, but just making sure that they've thought through these different steps, as well as transportation, childcare, and if anyone seems uncertain and they are expressing some hesitation or concern that maybe they won't be able to vote because they'll have too much going on that day, make sure they know about early voting and vote by mail. So in addition to just person-to-person, points of contact and discussions that maybe intake or frontline staff are having, you can get the word out in other ways about voting, posting up signage or posters on the walls in the lobby or wherever people may congregate. just reminding them. It really helps build a sort of a culture of voting, and we know that positive peer pressure is really effective, and people are more likely to go out to vote if they feel like everyone around them is doing it. Uh, you want to use your existing communications to get the word out. If you send a regular newsletter, maybe find on one of the sidebars a little spot where you can just keep those early voting dates and a link uh, to the My Vote website where people can find their polling place. But you could also use social media. If you're getting any local attention from either radio shows or local news for even other events or things that you're working on, you could leverage that as a little pitch for people to vote, and that you're helping folks vote, and that you are a resource in your community for people who have questions or need assistance. Um, and then I love doing a good phone bank or phone canvas. If you can round up a group of volunteers to reach out to people in your network, people who may already be hearing from you about other things, give them a phone call and ask them those questions about if they're planning to vote, when and how. Um, it's it's I think probably one of the most effective ways to get people to vote because there's a person actually asking them, and that's so much more compelling than uh, than seeing it sort of secondhand and just post it up. Like that helps to reinforce, because usually as people, it takes a lot of repetition and seeing the same messages over and over again to really internalize them. So if you can cap all of your posters and social media posts with personal phone call from a volunteer or representative from your organization, that could really seal the deal. Before I jump into Election Day, are there any, I think I'm getting towards the end, are there questions?
Yeah, Caitlin, thanks for dropping in with that. So there aren't currently any right now, but this is a good segue to kind of, ask folks for if they do have any questions, comments, or anything that they'd like to share, anything that has worked for them, or if you have any questions about how to do certain things that Caitlin was discussing, this is your time to kind of reach out with those, and then following her presentation, we can kind of discuss those.
Great. So we've covered lots of things you can do between now and November 6th. So how do you keep up the momentum on Election Day? If you've positioned yourself as a resource in your community, you can continue to be helpful by reaching out, helping anyone who needs to find a polling place or who has questions about the voting process, and just fielding those questions. You can, just like ask people that you see, make that part of the greeting when people walk in, that somebody's asking them, saying Happy Election Day, asking if they've voted yet or if they need help voting. You could have a party for Election Day because it is a special day. It's a good celebration, and if if there's a party involved, people are going to be more interested in going out there, casting their ballot, getting their I voted sticker, and coming to your party. I'd also recommend, or if it's possible, allowing staff to take the day to become poll workers. This can be really great in the community, especially if maybe you feel like the people you serve um, don't see other folks that look like them at the polling place, or the people who are traditionally poll workers in your area, um, may not be as representative of the people that you're working with and trying to mobilize to vote. Maybe your staff is a better match and would make them feel more comfortable and demonstrate to your community and those that you serve that you're really committed to this. Letting people be poll workers for the day. There's also, poll watching in terms of election protection, making sure that, you know, people are getting the voting process that they deserve. So not being impeded by canvassers or campaign people, and also, that they're getting the right answers about same-day voter registration or needed ID. So I was right. I was getting towards the end. So these are just a lot of ideas for different ways that you can make the next month really impactful. If there's any time that is going to make a outsized kind of difference, I think it's these next 4 or 5 weeks. Now that buzz is in the air, we had National Voter Registration Day last week. People are really talking about and thinking about voting. It's really the right time to ensure that everyone is brought into that conversation and feels like they have the information that they need to cast a ballot. So I guess with that, we can take any questions, if there are any, or if there's anything that you would like me to go over more in depth, or a point I did not touch upon, Tom, I'd be happy to do that.
Sure, yeah. So I just wanted to mention about the day of events and things like that you can do. You had mentioned about working at polls and things like that. So on our website, we actually have a whole page that's dedicated to nonprofits and voting and things. And we do have a lot of resources on there. A lot of the ones that Caitlin had mentioned with regards to My Vote Wisconsin and things like that. But there's also some information on there about how you can become an election official. Being in the city of Madison, we do have some information about that. And then also working with the League of Women Voters. They're a great resource for becoming involved with a lot of election activities and things like that. So just wanted to point that out. And Caitlin did also mention that we are going to be providing that day off for our staff to volunteer and work in the polls. Maybe that's even driving folks to the polls. That's a big barrier too that we're seeing, is that folks are registered and everything like that, but it's just really difficult for them to get to their polling place. So we're working towards providing that. Do you know of any national or any other resources that folks can get in contact with to do volunteer on that day of, Caitlin?
Well, to be honest, a lot does happen. A lot is coordinated by campaigns, especially Rise to the Polls. So I would say, obviously we're nonprofits. We have to maintain our nonpartisan status. But if you say you have the day off, please use it to do something related to the election, it would be totally fine for staff members to volunteer with a campaign that they care deeply about. It wouldn't, it was their choice and it's their personal time, so they would be able to do that. It wouldn't be an issue. If people were trying, it couldn't be anything coordinated like all of us from this nonprofit are going to go to this person's campaign and wear the t-shirt. No. But I would say campaigns are probably going to have the best sort of local understanding of who needs help, and a lot of campaigns put out information about, rides to the polls, where they, if you call up the campaign, they'll provide folks that need rides there. But League of, you mentioned League of Women Voters. That's a great organization, and just working with your local election office to find out, what their needs are. Another idea, if it makes sense for your organization, could be to provide childcare while parents vote, because especially if you anticipate sort of longer lines at polling places, not having to have the little ones in tow could be really helpful. Or, providing a meal to folks who, they're spending the time they'd otherwise spend preparing dinner. Just you provide that meal for them. So those are some options and ideas. But I would really look to sort of your local community more so than national organizations for Election Day activities to really plug into.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. So, we are, nobody has really put in any questions or anything like that. So, feel free to ask any questions following the presentation. Once we leave here, feel free to reach out to myself, and I can definitely put you in contact with Caitlin, and she can provide some of those resources for you. So, thanks again for everyone who joined today's presentation. Another special thanks to Caitlin and Nonprofit Vote for their hard work putting this presentation together and all that they do. As I mentioned in the introduction, an email will be sent to you all later this week that will include the recording of the presentation and webinar slides. And we will also be hosting another webinar in October. We're still working to find a date and a time, but so hang on and stay tuned for that. But that presentation will include speakers Winona Wolf and Erica Nelson of Kids Forward, and it will be regarding their project Race to the Polls, which is a collaboration between Kids Forward, Race to Equity, and the Wisconsin Budget Project. As public policy and advocacy organizations, they see the importance of centering the voices of needs of communities of color in the democratic process. Through their data and policy analysis, they have found that an alarming racial disparity exists between Wisconsin's white population and its African American, Asian American, Latinx, and Native American populations, which stem from hundreds of years of inequitable policies. Our hope is that the Race to the Polls can support and amplify the work of people of color and organizations that are committed to racial justice that they've been doing for many, many years. Everyone must play their part in making Wisconsin the best place for every child, every family, and every community, including us. For more information about this project, you can visit racetothepolls.org. And they're also doing a pledge drive, too, for voting. I actually filled out my pledge card today, or last week, Friday, that I will be going out to vote. So that'll be a great campaign from them. But once again, thanks again for joining us. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules. Thanks again to Caitlin and Nonprofit Vote for all the work that they do. Hope all is well, and enjoy the rest of your Monday, and take care.